that short commercial break and weather and nature with Mollen, Kenyena, it is now time we look at our GMU agenda, where we look at issues of national concern, but also issues that affect us almost individually, but with different magnitude at which we are affected. And this morning we are going to be looking at trade order with specific emphasis aimed at decongesting the city and seeing vendors off the streets. Now, for a long time, we've seen running battles between KCCA enforcement and vendors. However, a united or a mixture of stakeholders meeting was held and was resolved that vendors leave the streets. And had a deadline as of 10th that no vendor would be seen on the streets of the 5 divisions that make Kampala. Now with me in studios to discuss this is the head of commercial services, Henry Kenya, with whom we want to know more regarding this and the way forward of this. Mr. Kenya, you're most welcome to our studios once again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kirabo. Good morning, viewers of UBC, and Happy New Year.
Well, let's begin with, we know all cities globally, there is what we call trade order.
Yes. And
cities are very organized. Coming to Kampala or coming to Uganda, one of the things you find is that we have congestion, we have a mixture one could hardly know. And this time around you seem determined than ever before to ensure I restore this order, starting with the vendors themselves. What is the possibility of this being a reality? Because something you've talked about over and over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kirabo. Yes. As the Kampala Capital City Authority, we have a campaign that we are running, and that is the Smart City.
Okay.
We have a campaign that we are running, that is Smart City. And among the issues that we are looking at is, of course, decongesting the city. So us coming up to clear our streets is one of the strategies in an effort to achieve that objective. We are all aware vendors have always been on the streets, and what has been happening is that before the outbreak of COVID-19, that is 2020, we used to have some vendors, but they were not so many as you see them these days. But again, the lockdown that we went into as a country brought many vendors. As you can remember, many businesses, when they were closed because of the lockdown, they chose to venture into vending food. In fact, today, majority of street vendors that you're seeing are vending food. Now, when you look at how they came, some of them, of course, I've talked about those that were dealing in particular businesses which were closed, like our brothers and sisters who used to deal in the bar business. And when all those businesses were closed, they chose to venture into vending food. And that's what has been actually occupying most of our streets. That is one. Two, we also have vendors that were operating in our markets. But because of the lockdown, where majority of businesses closed down, some of them moved out of the markets and came to streets. So this exacerbated the situation that even when we used to have moderate vendors operating on the streets, because of the lockdown, many people whose businesses were closed, they chose to come on the streets. So that is the reason our streets got filled up with, actually majority of them are vending food. But now there are two factors that we look at. We have those that, of course, ventured into street vending just because their businesses were locked up, but there are also those who had their working spaces somewhere, either in shops or in markets, but they chose to come on the street. And now that has caused that kind of congestion that you are seeing in our streets. So as an institution, in our effort, first of all, to have a smart city, we have to start cleaning our streets by relocating some of those ones. Of course, we are aware, and the nation is also aware, that these other people, our vendors who came from markets where they have actually working facilities, they can go back to their markets. Today, as we are trying to relocate them, we are encouraging some of those ones. We have a market, new market, that is Usafi market. So far, we have taken over about 180 vendors from streets, but you realize that majority of those ones were once in Usafi, but they had chosen to move out and start operating on the streets. So, yes, that challenge has been there. In some cities, yes, there are vendors, but in those cities, vendors have been working in an organized way. In Kampala, vendors are just littered everywhere. And it is now that we must come up as a city in an effort to decongest, but also to plan for them and be able to relocate them where they can operate safely.
Well, let's begin with understanding the word relocate them.
Yes.
Many times we've had cases coming up and alluding to the fact that there are spaces in markets. There are spaces this people should go.
Yeah.
But this goes with affordability. Because a vendor is a person who can even start with 5,000 and they are good to go.
Yes.
10,000, they are good to go. When we talk about these spaces, are they free spaces? As in, no token is going to be paid. Let's begin at that, because many vendors have said, KCC is telling us there are spaces. But my capital, for me, I operate within between 10,000 and 20,000. I finish my stock, I go again. So this if I'm to pay any penny, I think it's very expensive for me. Then others have also said, this is just a myth that the technical bit of the authority sits there and assumes, because none of them is a vendor. So they assume there are spaces. When they walk through these markets and they see some empty stores, they think the spaces are there, yet maybe someone is renting out this for something else.
Thank you, Mr. Kirabo. By the way, the truth of the matter is that vendors, even where they're operating on the streets, there are people whom they are paying to operate wherever they are working from. That is the fact. So nobody should come here and start telling you lies that actually wherever they are operating from it is a free environment. No, it's not. They are people who seemingly own those kind of streets where they are operating from. And what is happening is that when we are encouraging them to come to our markets, take an example of Usafi market. A store in Usafi market is at 6,500 per month. Some of vendors in those streets, more especially downtown, every day some of them pay more than 5,000 a day to operate wherever they're operating from. Here we are telling them that when you come to a market like Usafi, you will only be required to pay 6,500 a month, by the way. And you getting that facility is free of charge. This is a government facility that we just welcome you, give you space where you can operate from. However, majority of them had chosen to decline taking on those facilities just because for them they have a mentality that when you are operating on the street, you can easily access customers. And that has always been the challenge. So, but also the challenge I think which we have been having as an institution is coming to chase them off the street, but again we do not occupy where they are. So right now we are looking at relocating them to markets, but also occupying the areas where they have been operating from, because that way they will be able to settle where we are taking them. That is one. Two,
now before we move to another point, let's look at occupying where they have been working, because move along streets, just even outside UBC here, you find those airtime, some tea. How are you going to occupy these spaces? What are those plans like?
Yes, we come up with our enforcement team monitoring most of these streets. And what we are going to do, it is also a strategy of us managing this exercise, that where we are going to remove them, we make sure that we have a team that will be monitoring, and it will be a sector by sector. It's not just going to be the entire operation for the entire city. It will be a progressive operation.
How different would that be? Because when I move downtown, the times I do, you find that your staff are everywhere. This is my opinion. Your staff are almost everywhere. But very interesting that the vendors are also there. So is it an issue of integrity? It's an issue of corruption? What is the relevance of staff being there and one will tell you, thank you,
Mr. Kirabo. You see, some of the challenges, of course, that you always have when you have an operation is some bit of integrity, which we are trying to handle. And this time around, we are going to have other key stakeholders being brought on board to handle this issue. So it's not an issue of Kampala Capital City Authority as per se, but it is a government issue, okay, where we are going to have each and every key stakeholder on board. For instance, we are going to have police on board. But however, what we have also realized is that majority of our vendors have been kept on the streets because of you and me, who keep buying from them. Okay,
they are readily available. If you
are readily available as you're driving through the traffic jam, you also extend your hand to buy something. And we are very soon coming up with a law that will also be used to apprehend some of those clients who are encouraging that act to be on the street. So somehow we think it will also enable us to curb this vice. However, I think the most important issue here is to make sure that we find them workplaces and we try to keep them there, but we also train them, because some of them are not trained in these soft business skills. And for them, one thing they know is that you can just get a capital, low capital, get somewhere on the street, so occupy there and start operating. But again, if we have a strategy, but this will only be possible if we can have them in some gazetted areas, say markets. I also want to tell you this, Mr. Kirabo, is that vendors' leadership has also been a little bit collaborative, and I want to thank them. There is somewhere along Kalere where they established a place where they think they can be able to relocate their friends, and that is something that I think is really very important when it can come from within themselves. So you see, something they came up with, and they proposed to us that, you see, we are hearing this and that, but we have also established a place here where we think we can take about 5,000 vendors. And yes, we are trying to look at that as well. But why am I saying this? Is that it becomes easier for us to add value onto them if we can be able to find them in one gazetted area. If it is in the markets, it is easier for us to give them the required skills that can propel them in whichever way, more especially in terms of businesses. So we are on it, and we think partnering with them and the other key stakeholders, we shall be able to achieve our objective as an institution.
In a number of cities around the world, vendors may not necessarily be removed from streets and taken to markets, but they could gazette some streets for them. We once had this in Kampala. I think it began on weekends.
Yes.
We had gazetted some of the streets. Now they are non-motorized streets as of now. But here vendors would. I was trying to speak to a number of them, and one of the things they told me is, Robert, people must understand our business. That a vendor being positioned or relocated to a market may be something hard for them to adjust than when you gazette maybe a particular stretch, particular street, and those that want the nature of goods they sell with a few risks attached to them can go and find them at that particular place. Here the talk is markets, 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 which may not be their modus of operating in one or the other.
Yeah, thank you. It's very true. But you also know that there is something to do with the mind change. And you can only achieve that when you have them in a one gazetted area. Of course, it is very true. As an institution, we had gazetted Lumu Street up to Entebbe Road for Sunday market, and they have always been operating from there. And we are going ahead to make sure that we also get some other streets so we can be able to gazette and relocate them to start operating on specific days. Yes, that happens in many cities. So we call this a street market, Sunday street market. We have it, but we're also going to relocate it because of that in non-motorized way. We are looking at for streets which we think will be suitable for them to operate. that is also there. And that is one of the reasons that in our effort to make sure that we streamline their operations, we came up with a law which is a street trade ordinance. It is still under review, which we thought that probably to enable us to, of course, give some bit of guidance on how they can operate. And we think that that law coming up will really give us a leeway for us to plan for our, because they are business people and they start small. So we want to have that kind of legislation that will enable us to plan for them, but within the confines of the law. That is also there. And within that law, we proposed that probably we can have streets like you've talked about it, which we can gazette for them to be able to operate. But that said, we still think and know that markets are better for them. Why? It is easier for them to develop from gazetted areas, same markets, than when they are on the streets. It is easy for us to plan, train them in those gazetted areas, give them those soft skills, and the majority of them can now be able to transition into probably formal now businesses in shops, arcades. We have so many of those ones. If you are able to hear some of the stories from our rich guys in Kampala, some of them started on the streets, and they will tell you that yes, we started on the streets somehow, we entered the market, so we started some small shops, and here we are. But you know that was also possible because somewhere, somehow, they were able to pick on skills that propelled them to where they are. So this is one of the strategies that we would wish to take on as an institution, have them trained, give them those soft skills, be able to, some of them are even willing to diversify their businesses instead of operating on the streets. And this way, we shall first of all decongest our city, but also have our people well planned for. Yes.
Henry, talking about the laws, talking about the plans, I think since inception of KCCA from Kampala City Council, this has been the talk. And one of the hindrances has been political intervention. At this time around, which guarantee do we have? The element of politicizing. Recently, I saw the mayor of Kampala Central hitting the negative angle. The Lord Mayor was very clear, hitting the negative aspect of all these initiatives, saying there's room for everybody in the city. This city can accommodate us. We can do this, we can do that, we can do this, but we can't chase these people. Where are you chasing them to? We are in a COVID situation. These people did not call, it wasn't choice for them to vent, some of them. It was the need to feed for their families. So with these political voices here and there, most when it comes to Kampala, what guarantee do we have that this time we are going to see this trade order implemented, vendors properly located and planned for?
Thank you. But I think the most important thing here is to have fruitful engagements with each and every key stakeholder in this, like I already mentioned about it. So including our politicians. So it's actually very important for us to explain to them some of the key issues that happen behind curtains. I will tell you, some of them will not actually know that where these vendors are operating from are paying. And yet they are paying. So now when we have this information, it is incumbent upon us to go and engage all these key stakeholders and enlighten them on some of the issues happening. But also it is very true, like what you said, Lord Mayor said, that this city can accommodate each and everybody. Yes, that is a valid point. It can accommodate, but where can we accommodate these people? We can accommodate them in the markets. We can accommodate them in other gazetted places. I have already hinted about the place which they have already secured around Karere. We can be able to accommodate them. That is still in the city. But I think the most important thing here is to streamline their operations. It's not about chasing them that we are chasing them away. Where are we chasing them to, and what are the plans that we have for them? I will tell you this, Mr. Kirabo. Some of the vendors, whereas they are dealing in food items like I've already told you, we really want to thank our President, General Museveni, that he has shifted the lockdown. Majority of some of these vendors operating on the streets are the very people who used to work in some other businesses which had been closed, like our girls and boys who used to work in bars. Right now, I think on 24th, according to the President address, bars will be operational again, implying that some of those ones are also going to go back to their original businesses, which they used
may not be a guarantee, because maybe some would have found streets more profitable than their previous businesses.
Of course, even that one is there, because I will tell you right now, some schools are looking out for their teachers. Yesterday, schools opened, but there are some teachers who are saying, I think teaching is not now for me. I better venture into another business. So that one is also there. But what we are saying is that businesses which had been closed are now opened to operate, implying those who have been looking out for surviving from somewhere, say on the streets, they may go back. There are those who may not go back because they are going to diversify, which is very important also. But what we are saying is, yes, those who had come from the markets, let them go back to markets. There are those who come from shops. You have your shop somewhere, you get a boy or two, give them some items to go and vend on the street. So we are saying, no, let us stop this vice. Retain your items in the shops, sell from there. There are also real shops that actually are chosen to relocate from their shops to come on the streets. So you find they distribute their items along a particular street. They give to a boy here, boy there, girl there. Some
park cars.
You know, and some park cars.
Merchandise, yes.
So this is what we are talking about. So we are talking about the reality, what is really happening. So apart from saying I'm sympathetic to our people operating on the street, what is behind this? Once you understand that, and of course we have done research and we have tried to understand this, and that's why we chose to take this decision that let us relocate them. There are those that were typically vendors, and as government, as KCCA, we are looking out for funds to buy more land where we can create or establish markets. We are in the final stages of finishing Busega market. In fact, it is almost complete, and we know it will be able to accommodate more people. Of course, taking on the people. In fact, I also call them vendors along with that Busega stretch, because they are on the street. So it will be able to accommodate all those plus some other new people. So let's take an example. The vendors who have been operating in Natete area can be absorbed in that market.
Well, let me first remind our viewers that you can be part of the topic of discussion this morning by simply going to our various social media platforms. It include our WhatsApp number, which is on your screen, 0709 60 25 92. Send in your message, your observation as we look at removing vendors off the streets in the 5 divisions of Kampala. What is your take on this? And I have a guest in studios, the head of commercial services, Kampala Capital City Authority, Henry Bukenya, with whom we are discussing this. So please send in your views, your opinions on this. The deadline was 10th, and that was Monday. Enforcement has begun its role to ensure that they vacate the streets, and we have order as we carry out trade in the city. Henry, you've talked about markets.
Yeah.
And there's always a big question that runs into my mind, or dilemma. But KCCA, when we look at some of the markets that you've worked upon, when you look at occupancy levels, one would say either they are rejecting them or something. Take up a case in point, the first market that we were so excited, that is Wandegea market. You go to Wandegea market, you will wonder, is it for the ordinary person? That is 1. 2, the level of occupancy. When you go to also other markets that KCCA has invested greatly, you find that markets are set up, people shun them, still they will not be in the markets. Even just a distance away from the market, you find them selling on the streets. What is causing this? And this is why you're saying we are looking for more land to buy. Won't this be wastage of the taxpayers' money?
You see, Mr. Kirabo, I think when we are talking about viability of markets in terms of occupancy, it brings us back to the issue that we are discussing this morning, the issue of vending on the streets. As we were starting the program, we talked about why they do vend on the streets. Is that mindset that you see when you're on the street, you can easily access a customer. Okay? And what we are trying to do today is that, yes, we know we have worker spaces in the available markets, more especially Wandege ya Usafi, and places like Kiswa market. We have another market in Nakawa division. It's called Kiswa. But now, why they have not
even
been
the Kisui around there is
even there,
modern
yes.
market. I was excited when I
That is
entered,
very true.
but I was shocked.
But they have been affected because of the presence of vending in most of the streets. And here we are saying that, okay, now you are where we have work facilities, can we please take you to these facilities and you start operating from there? That will make these markets viable. I will tell you, Usafi market, by the time it was built in 2013 by a private developer then, before it was bought by KCCA, it had been built for vendors. But they showed it. Why? Because they expected that them moving out of the streets where they have been operating from will lose their clientele. And that made Usafi as if it was a dormant market. But of course, when we started these operations, majority of those who had taken up some of these market facilities again ran back to reoccupy them, which is a good thing, by the way. So because of the numbers, I've talked about the numbers that used to operate on the streets even before the outbreak of COVID. So these are the numbers that we are looking at, that in case we get funding, we can be able to put up more market structures to accommodate them, so that we decongest the city totally. But also, like I highlighted, there is a lot to benefit on their side, that it gives the government an opportunity to train them even more in terms of the businesses they are managing. Okay.
Let me look at some of the messages coming in. Please keep your messages coming in. I'll be reading them out. A very interesting one here. The local population needs to understand that, he mentions a certain politician in Kampala will continue to take advantage of the poor to ensure that the poor continue to be poor at the streets, and keeps advocating for something that is votes and votes outcome. These people ask him to stop stop playing on the vulnerable. That is Amudu Taridi, that is from Padel. He says there must be told that traders to stop taking, the politicians should stop taking advantage of the vulnerable and advocate for a clean city and tell them the fact to leave the streets. Well, is replying to the issues that we see where politicians kick on. Then this is George Kiwota from Padel. Kampala has changed from a city to auction center. Vendors everywhere, and KCJ is just looking on. Please gazette somewhere away from the city center so that we can enjoy the city. Thank you. Well, thank you, George, for your message. But please give us your name. Many of the messages I'm not able to read them because you have not. We are not knowing who is actually communicating with us. So send message with your name, and we'll be able to reply to that. Okay. One of the issues also here. It's the element of corruption. For me, I want to believe, and I stand to be corrected. My own observation, when I've moved to some of the markets where government, through KCCA, has invested billions of money. For example, purchase of Usafi. I think what is of about 30 billion. That government invested there. When you move and see these empty stores, go to Wandege. When you move and see these empty stores, go to the modern Kasubi, that market around there. Well, it is so clean, so beautiful, so nice. I don't find that people occupying these stores. Don't you think KCA has to be do some sincere cleaning in terms of fighting corruption? That I don't. With these spaces, why would we crave for more markets? Musega, billions actually. It has taken long to be completed. But even you look at the structure, just these are billions of money. Don't you think what is important is first fight corruption, because most of these vendors will tell you, you talked about them giving money for someone to use that space, but many will tell you, for us we are here because of someone. I won't mention names here. So fetuliba wantuliwa kuragundi, and monthly or daily they remit money to this person. Who could be an official, who could be in the enforcement. Dirty hands in cases here.
Yeah, thank you. I think fighting corruption, yes, is very important, but it is a disciplinary action that we always take through our people, more especially our staff. I want to tell you this, Mr. Kirabo, when it comes to our markets, where we have direct management, we have tried to deal with the corruption tendencies, and we don't think that our vendors can be out there and start talking about them being sold these spaces. We even encourage them to always report to our offices in case they went there and probably somebody is asking money from them. That we have dealt with it, and we shall continue doing so. But I also want to tell you this, that some of the markets which were constructed, so a market like Wandegea, it was a redevelopment. Why is it a redevelopment? Before the construction of that market, there were 4 markets in that place. So implying as you're redeveloping, the first people to be taken care of are those people that have been operating there. Okay? Now, there was a tendency that if a person had, say, 6 working facilities in the old 4 markets, in their MOUs with the local government then, which was in charge of constructing that market, agreed that the number of facilities you had in your old 4 markets will be the same number that we will have in the new market. Now that caused some bit of problem. Why? First of all, it indirectly allowed subletting, and we are trying to find a way of dealing with that, but within the legal framework. Otherwise, if you just come and say you are taking over somebody's facilities, those are legal issues that you cannot manage. But where there are redevelopment, some of those issues normally come up. But where there is totally a new development, say you are seeing Chitintale, we shall have to make sure it is one facility, one vendor, and there will be no corruption tendencies. That we have tried to deal with it. But also when you look at the general environment, the people that we are dealing with in terms of businesses, somebody will come and for them they will think that floating money will actually immediately work on to what they want. And we have always discouraged them. In fact, at one time I had instructed my officers that if somebody comes fronting money, we better arrest that person. I think what we shall also need to do is to start probably exposing some of these people. But fighting corruption is for all of us, but it always starts with me. Fighting corruption starts with me. So for us as an institution, we have our disciplinary mechanism that is in place, where we think somebody is really misbehaving in one way or the other,
you take action.
We always take action.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Henry Kenyena. Just in less than a minute, let me have your final remarks regarding that is first the vendors, and of course the ongoing operations are now aimed at eliminating or removing them totally for once and for all from the streets.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to thank you, BC, first of all, for this opportunity to talk about these issues which are affecting our city, but also to our business fraternity. You know, these are the first business guys that we have in our city, of course working with low capital, but we want to request and encourage them that it is a humble request to them to go to markets where we are calling them to go to. For example, we still have spaces in Usafi market, we still have spaces in Wandegea market, and we are ready to receive them. We have so far received a very good number of them, and they are working. But I also want to give thanks to their leadership for trying to look out for a place along Karere where they think they can take their colleagues. That is very important. So we want to encourage them, come to our markets which we have gazetted for you. We shall give you working space, and it is free. It is free. but also not forgetting to encourage them. COVID is still there, and now that with this new Omicron, we are encouraging them, when you come to market, please always put on your face masks and observe the SOPs that have been put in place by Ministry of Health.
Well, thank you so much for having phone time to the vendors. There is free space in the market. You're not paying for that, so take advantage of this. We need all a clean and organized city to ensure that trade is done in an orderly manner. Have a lovely day. Ruben is very, very prepared to give you all those exciting moments in the sports arena. Till tomorrow, God bless you. Stay safe. Go and take that jab, please, because it will save your life and also save us from investing so much in treatment and fighting COVID-19. Good morning.